I've tried working in a lot of places. I've worked in a loft in Abbot Kinney in Venice that we just had to wire up. I've worked out of an Airstream. You know, I mean, it's just trying to throw people off balance so they do something new and they don't keep repeating what they're doing. But a soundstage, like you said, is one when you need a big room. You know, you can't do that in the loft in Venice.
I fell in love with the idea right away because I walked into Center Staging Studio One, and it immediately brought me back to the first place that I ever recorded was RCA Studio A in New York, which is like, you know, 48th Street Studio, which was exactly the same. It felt like exactly the same dimensions. Like, this is the way they used to record, you know. These big padded, you know, wooden floors, and I just instantly, you know, wanted to go for it. I want to record like this.
It's so weird that you say that, because, when I first time I came in here, it reminded me of an old show from the '50s called The Sound of Jazz. It's got Count Basie and Thelonious Monk and Billie Holiday playing, and it's just an unadorned soundstage with the and I thought, I remember watching that, you know, as a young person and thinking, that's where I want to be.
Yeah.
So one of the features of working in a soundstage is basically you have a lot more time, or you tend to take a lot more time to do.
Well, I don't think you should. I don't think you should change much. You know, I mean, it's not just because you can take the time. That doesn't mean you're going to make a better record. In fact, one of the dangers of getting out of the conventional recording studio, where you're paying by the day, and having home recording equipment, whether it's at home or on a soundstage or in an Airstream someplace, one of the dangers is the likelihood, which is there's a very good likelihood that you will overcook the soup. If you can afford to sit there and keep messing with stuff, eventually you will succeed in taking the life out of it. So you have to make it a real point to quit, to go home. Yeah. It took me years to learn that, because at first Pro Tools is so, it seduces you, man, into thinking that, wow, if we just keep messing with this, it'll be Sgt. Pepper. And no, you keep messing with it, it's a mess, and you can sterilize the thing. It's a neutral color. It's not an evil thing, but it's just spending more time isn't a good thing. What you can do is spend a lot less money in the same amount of time. I think that's get in there, make your record, and get out, man. You know, don't start second guessing yourself. Like Allen Ginsberg used to say, first idea, best idea.
Right.
You know?
Right. Just to underscore that, this is a quote from Trey Gunn of King Crimson from the October issue of EQ 2005. There's something about knocking it out quickly, desperately, and dangerously. Where there's a certain amount of desperation, you just go to a higher level. We miss so much today with Pro Tools and related means of recording. If you know that you can do 30 takes, then you don't necessarily pour 100% into each one of them. When the Beatles were recording albums, Bouncing Tambourine and such, and they only had 2 takes to nail it, there was an aura of desperation that translated onto tape.
If people feel that way, then as producers, we're not doing our jobs. We should, I mean, it doesn't matter what the situation is, you should have people inspired to give 110% to themselves, you know. I have worked with guys who can go out there and sing, you know, play 300 shows a year and sing great and insist on doing 75 tracks of vocals, and in the 75, never once do they get the high note, whereas if they had one shot to get it, they'd get it. So I've seen that happen, but that's my fault. No, it's not their fault.
Pressure can definitely be a good thing. You know, and creating necessity, you know, creating an atmosphere where it's necessary that you hit it, you know. This counts. You know, every note's a symphony, and this counts. We're not just going to, you know, lumber through it and see if we get it. It's a good thing, you know. And some writers, I once heard Marshall Crenshaw say that he'd never written a song that he didn't have a deadline to write.
yeah. Oh, deadline. Yeah. Okay. That's a good point.
Yeah, we writers have a more succinct way of putting this idea. Deadlines, the writer's friend, which is sort of an ironic way of saying that in spite of the resentment we feel towards our editors or our deadlines, they force us to make tough decisions, and it can also force a sort of soulfulness out of the work. So, do you have any other thoughts about what's lost when you're working outside the pressurized crucible of the recording studio?
Forget the atmosphere for a moment. After doing a lot of remote sessions, last summer I went back into the now defunct Cello Studio 2, set up 2-inch tape, and we made a live Solomon Burke record. Don't kid yourself. It sounds better. Okay? It's gonna sound better. You go through, I don't mean just the room, the combination of the room, the board, and the old Neve in there, the 2-inch tape. Now, does that matter is the real question. You know, if you're making records for Al Schmitt, maybe, but he only buys one record. He probably gets it free. The reality is that other records that I made in slightly less ideal situations, recording-wise, have sold much better than Solomon Burke. There's no guarantee that you got a hit. And as a matter of fact, if you really think about it, after you do all that recording, and you go mix with some guy who puts some new drum samples in anyway, you master with a guy who is under pressure from the record companies to make a loud record, and in the process of doing that, you get some kind of digital compression going on, so the sound has changed. Then you're going to pressing plants that have absolutely no quality control. You know, the quality control is, yes, there's data on the disc. That's just for, they don't listen to what they're doing. So there's a wide variance in the manufacturing, which is impossible to supervise over a period of time. Then you sell it to someone who's driving around in a Volvo with the left speaker off for 3 years, you know, and so the question is, does it matter that you've got this extra 10% of better sound? No, I don't think so. We just made a Rolling Stones record, and it was primarily recorded in a room at Mick Jagger's house in France. It's just a room, an untreated room, and the computer was right in the room, and it sounds better to me than records that we made where we spent a couple $1 million in the studio. And the things that I think are important in records, writing better songs, giving good performances, those aren't governed by what tape compression sounds like. So, did I go left, or did I answer that question?
Is that a mouthful?